The cancellation of Mike Lindell continues. You might have thought continues. I thought it already had reached its final point. Once you take this guy and you pull him out of all these box stores and you pull him out of all these different channels for selling his products, what's left? How can you cancel? You cancel his social media account. So there's a massive effort to shut down Lindell. Think about it. A guy who makes pillows and other products has become like a national threat to the left. And here's the latest. Minnesota Bank and Trust moves to cancel Mike Lindell's bank accounts. Is it because, he's not paying his wire fees? Is it because he's proven to be kind of a bad customer? He writes checks about none of it. He's actually a very good customer, and you can imagine a large customer. But even so, they've decided it's too dangerous to be associated with Mike Lindell. And I want you to listen to the audio. We got this from Lindell's guys directly. This is audio of a phone call by a senior bank official at Minnesota Bank and Trust explaining this to the folks at MyPillow. Listen.
So you're saying, so right now the timeline that we're kind of given is that the account needs to be closed
this week for frank speech
by Friday. You're saying, or just by the end of okay?
I would say within 7 days if you could, and if you would, and there isn't nobody's chasing you, but it's my boss's boss has said, Tom, would you please?
Yeah, no, I understand. And at the end of the day, that's you have to do what your job requires you to. Can you give me any? So you said there's also potentially some bleeding going into over the other accounts as well.
But, I would say all of them, yes.
So it just hasn't reached in that height yet. But I could be getting a call next week with the same conversation.
Well, this would be the same call to say frank speech for sure as soon as we can. In the next month, if we could, the other accounts as well. Just it's the perceived public reputation risk that if for some crazy reason somebody subpoenas and asks for bank records, we just don't want to have our name in the press.
Very telling. Here are the bank accounts in question, frank speech, but others. Lindell Management, Lindell Outreach, Lindell Recovery Network, and this is Mike's charitable account, Lindell TV, Lindell Foundation, Lindell Publishing, Mike Lindell Personal, and My Store. Now, Mike Lindell tried to get a hold of this guy named Stephen Bishop. He's the CEO of Minnesota Bank and Trust. But Bishop, this is so typical of these cowards. He's like, I'm in a meeting. I'm really busy. Think about it. You're causing a scandal here, and he's in a meeting. What he really means is I'm sort of too timid to have to come and give a direct explanation myself. But what really struck me was that the guy calling Lindell here is not your typical, Stalinist who's like, I'm going to cancel all your account. He's actually very nice about it. He's got this kind of civilized Midwestern tone. He's trying to be helpful. He obviously knows that Mike hasn't done anything wrong, and he's actually friendly to Mike. But what's going on here is he's following orders. He got it from the boss. He's passing it on. So, interestingly here, and I think this is true not just of the guy calling, but it's also true of the bank in general, they have no quarrel with Mike Lindell. It's not as if their customers are objecting, none of this. But it's pass-through intolerance. They're afraid that if as they say, there's an FBI subpoena, we want your bank records, somehow the bank will be tarnished. But why? Why would the bank be tarnished? The banks have all kinds of customers. If someone comes and says, listen, turn over the records for Mike Lindell, turn them over, big deal. Well, it's not going to affect the reputation of Minnesota Bank and Trust. So what I find interesting here is, and you begin to see the way in which this is this domino effect, in which you start by canceling a guy for one reason, and the second guy doesn't really share the reason. He doesn't have Antifa members on his board. Nobody's actually threatening him. No one's even raised the issue. But they're like, well, listen, that guy's he's become a little radioactive, so let's cancel his bank account. And you begin to see here, I would call it creeping totalitarianism. And yes, today it's Mike Lindell. I think I've talked on the podcast before how about I myself had to deal with this issue during my case with Chase Bank, where they inexplicably canceled my account. Again, the people in the local office at Chase were like, we don't really get it. It makes no sense. It's a notation here inside your file, and it's coming from the very top at Chase. So again, what happens is that you've got nice people who work at the bank, and this guy called Mike and co-calls of MyPillow seems to be a reasonably nice guy, but he ends up becoming a henchman. He ends up doing dirty work for a very bad action with very wide-reaching consequences. And this is a way where, even in the private sphere, a guy who has the wrong views, the wrong faith, the wrong outspokenness, asking the wrong kinds of questions, ultimately not just can't have a social media account, but not just can't sell his stuff in the box stores, but can't even deposit a check in a bank.